What would you do if you gave birth to twins, one black and one white? It's a question that seems almost impossible, right? But for Emily Parker, that's exactly what happened. The moment she first laid eyes on her newborn twins, a chill ran down her spine, and a feeling of utter disbelief washed over her. They were nothing like she expected. Emily had always dreamed of this day, of holding her babies in her arms, surrounded by love and joy. She had pictured the perfect family, with little feet to run around and small hands to hold. But when the twins were born, Emily felt something far from what she imagined. One baby was fair-skinned with soft blonde hair, looking just like her. The other had rich, dark skin, with thick curly hair, unlike anything Emily could have ever expected. The hospital room felt cold and sterile despite the rush of emotions racing through her. She stared at them, one cradled in each arm, her heart hammering in her chest. The nurses glanced between each other, obviously trying to hide their confusion, but it was hard not to see it in their eyes. Emily tried to hold on to the love she felt for both her children, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. "Everything okay?" the nurse asked gently, a hint of concern in her voice. Emily nodded, though she was far from certain. "Yes, I don't understand." The nurse gave a soft smile, her eyes glinting with sympathy, but Emily could tell she was holding back a multitude of questions. It wasn't until Emily's husband, Mark, arrived from his business trip that the tension in the room truly escalated. He walked in with a smile, his blue eyes lighting up at the sight of his newborn children. But when his gaze fell on the twins, the smile faltered. His eyes locked onto the darker-skinned baby, and a split second of silence passed between them. "Emily," Mark's voice cracked slightly, his confusion palpable. Are you sure they're both ours?" Emily felt a pang in her chest at his words. She wasn't sure how to respond. Of course, they were both theirs, she had carried them for 9 months, felt them move inside her, held them now in her arms. But his question pierced her with a feeling of doubt she hadn't expected to experience in this moment. "I don't know what you mean, Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark didn't seem to hear her as he stepped closer, his gaze still fixed on the baby with dark skin. How is this even possible?" "Emily, these babies don't look the same. They don't look anything like," he stopped himself, the words hanging in the air like an accusation. The silence in the room was deafening. Emily's mind raced. What was he suggesting? Was he doubting her? How could he think such a thing? "I don't know," Emily murmured, tears pricking at her eyes. "But they're ours. Both of them." Mark didn't answer immediately. Instead, he just sat down in a chair beside her, running a hand through his hair, his face pale. The shock was evident, but it was his doubt, the questioning in his eyes, that stung the most. For the next few days, the hospital felt like a pressure cooker. The nurses came in and out, their smiles strained, offering half-hearted congratulations as they did their best to avoid looking at the twins. Emily could feel the weight of their whispers, the unspoken judgment that hung in the air. But it wasn't just the hospital staff. Once Mark began sharing the news with their families, the whispers followed them home. Emily tried to brush it off. She knew that sometimes people were quick to judge. But even the most supportive members of her family seemed perplexed by the twins' differences. "Maybe it's just a genetic fluke," Emily's mother offered, though her voice lacked conviction. "Or maybe one of them doesn't belong to you," Emily's brother, Luke, said half-jokingly, though his tone carried an edge that felt far from playful. Emily forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She tried to reassure herself that this was just shock, just confusion. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And the doubt, it seemed, was spreading. A week after the twins were born, Mark insisted on a paternity test. "I just need to be sure," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "I love them, Emily. But this. I need answers." Emily felt her heart shatter. The trust they had built over the years was now under siege. Mark wasn't just doubting the twins, he was doubting her. "I've told you, Mark," Emily said, her voice quivering with emotion, "they're yours. I haven't been with anyone else. How can you even ask me that?" But Mark didn't seem to hear her. His mind was already made up, and in that moment, Emily realized just how deep his doubt ran. It was clear that nothing she said could convince him otherwise. The need for a DNA test had become non-negotiable. Emily lay in bed that night, tears silently soaking her pillow as she cradled her babies in her arms. How had it come to this? How had the joy of motherhood turned into this feeling of betrayal? The next day, the test was done. Mark was adamant that it would settle everything. Emily, though, was left in a cloud of anxiety, wondering what it would mean if the test didn't provide the answers they both hoped for. Emily had always believed in the strength of their relationship, but now, everything seemed so fragile, as though it could shatter with a single wrong answer. In that moment, Emily couldn't help but wonder, could their family survive this storm? Would she ever feel like she was enough for her husband again? And most of all, would their children grow up in a world where they would always have to prove they belonged, simply because of how they looked? As the days passed, the tension only grew. The results of the test seemed like they were becoming the key to Emily's very identity, her worth as a mother, as a wife, and as a person. But no matter what the results showed, Emily couldn't escape one undeniable truth: her love for these children, for both of them, was beyond measure. The question was, would Mark be able to accept that love? The answer, she realized, might change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emily Parker had always believed that love and family were simple. Raised in a small town in the Midwest, she was the kind of girl who grew up with a clear vision of her life. She had the picture-perfect childhood, loving parents, a nice home, and a tight-knit group of friends who had always been there for her. She and Mark met during their sophomore year of college, and from the moment they started talking, it felt like they'd known each other forever. They shared everything: their hopes, dreams, fears, and insecurities. It was one of those rare connections that felt like fate had brought them together. Mark was her rock. A tall, rugged man with a charming smile and easygoing nature, he had been Emily's first love, and she believed, her forever love. They made each other laugh, supported one another through tough times, and shared everything from lazy weekends to grand adventures. After graduation, Emily moved into Mark's small but cozy apartment, and together they built a life. They weren't wealthy, but they had enough. Emily worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and Mark had a steady job in sales. Their dream was always to have a family, just like the one Emily had grown up in. They envisioned a few kids, a house with a picket fence, and weekends spent in the park. Emily had always loved the idea of motherhood. She pictured herself as a loving, attentive mother, just like her own mom had been to her. As a child, she had always been close to her parents, and it seemed natural to want the same for her own future children. But like many couples, Emily and Mark faced challenges. After a few years of trying, Emily found herself struggling with infertility. She didn't talk about it much to anyone, not even to Mark, but it weighed heavily on her heart. It was never an issue of love between them, it was an issue of biology, of timing, and of expectations that weren't being met. The couple went through rounds of tests, treatments, and procedures, each time growing more and more discouraged. Emily wanted to believe that it would happen, that they would get their miracle. But month after month, the results remained the same: no pregnancy. It was a tough season in their relationship. They had to rely on each other more than ever, but Emily could see the strain it was putting on Mark. He was trying to be strong for her, but the disappointment was eating away at both of them. Some nights, they would lay in bed, side by side, each staring up at the ceiling, wondering if they were ever going to be parents. Then came the day they had both been secretly hoping for, yet neither of them dared to speak of. The positive pregnancy test. Emily had almost collapsed from joy when she saw it, flooded with tears, not just from relief, but from the sheer beauty of the moment. After years of heartache, they had finally achieved the impossible. The dream they had shared was finally coming true. When Emily told Mark the news, he held her tight and kissed her forehead. They both laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed by the joy of it all. It was a new chapter in their lives, one they had dreamed about for so long. The future looked bright again. They were going to be parents. Mark was ecstatic, and Emily could see it in the way he started talking about their future family. He talked about names, bedrooms, and trips to the zoo. For Emily, those conversations were like a breath of fresh air after so many years of grief and uncertainty. Finally, they were going to have the family they had always dreamed of. But in the back of Emily's mind, there was a lingering fear. The fear that something would go wrong. That this miracle pregnancy would somehow slip through their fingers. So when she found out she was having twins, she was both ecstatic and terrified. 2 babies. Twice the joy. Twice the responsibility. The pregnancy was smooth at first, and Emily couldn't wait to feel the kicks and movements of her little ones. Mark was already making plans for their nursery, buying clothes, and setting up the house for their growing family. But there were a few subtle signs that made Emily uneasy. During one of her routine checkups, the doctor mentioned something about the twins' development, though it wasn't anything alarming. Still, there was a feeling deep in her gut that wouldn't go away. When the day of the birth arrived, it felt like the culmination of everything they had been through. Emily was nervous, but she was also filled with an overwhelming sense of excitement. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, holding her babies in her arms, watching Mark become a father, and starting their new chapter together. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened when the twins were born. One of them, a girl, had the pale skin of her mother, blonde curls framing her face like a halo. But the other baby, her son, had skin as dark as midnight, with tight, curly hair that seemed to stand on end. Emily's heart sank, her thoughts racing in confusion. How could this be? She had never expected anything like this. Not in her wildest dreams had she imagined that she would give birth to twins, one looking like her and the other not. As Emily held them in her arms, trying to process what had just happened, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. The doubt in her mind was growing, especially when she saw the look on Mark's face as he entered the room. His confusion was palpable. His gaze shifted from the baby with pale skin to the one with darker skin, and for a brief moment, Emily could see the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt that had begun to creep into her own heart. Mark had always been kind and accepting. Their relationship was built on trust and mutual respect, and they had shared a bond that felt unbreakable. But now, in the blink of an eye, everything seemed uncertain. The love that had been so easy between them now felt complicated. And for Emily, that uncertainty was the hardest part to bear. As the days passed in the hospital, Emily felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. It wasn't just about the babies anymore, it was about her relationship with Mark, the expectations of their families, and the judgment from a world that often couldn't accept what it didn't understand. She had spent so long hoping and dreaming of this moment, only to have it overshadowed by a question she wasn't sure she could answer. Would Mark believe her? Would their families accept the twins? Would they ever be able to look at their children and see them for who they were, not just as the products of a situation they didn't understand, but as the beautiful, perfect little humans they truly were? The road ahead felt uncertain, but one thing was clear, Emily's journey as a mother had just begun. And the path she would walk with her children, and with Mark, was one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, family, and identity. The days after the birth of the twins felt like a blur. Emily spent most of her time in the hospital, adjusting to her new role as a mother and trying to wrap her mind around everything that had happened. Her heart swelled with love for both babies, but the unsettling tension between her and Mark lingered, always in the background, impossible to ignore. At first, Mark tried to act normal. He smiled when Emily talked about the future, even helping to set up the nursery once they returned home. But there was something in his eyes, a distance that wasn't there before. Emily knew he was struggling to make sense of it all, and she couldn't blame him. In many ways, she was struggling too. The paternity test results were expected to arrive in the mail within a few days, and Emily couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in her stomach every time she thought about it. Her mind raced with a million questions. What if the test showed something different? What if Mark wasn't the father of the darker-skinned twin? What would that mean for their family? She tried to tell herself that it didn't matter, that both babies were hers, and that no test could change that. But the doubt creeping into Mark's eyes had shaken her confidence, and she couldn't ignore the way his gaze lingered on their son, Michael, the one with the dark skin. There was something in his expression, something fragile and uncertain, that made her feel like their bond was already beginning to fray. "Are you okay?" Emily asked Mark one night as they sat together in their living room. Michael and Lily, her daughter, the one who looked like Emily, were both asleep in their cribs, the soft sound of their breathing filling the quiet room. It should have been a peaceful moment, but instead, Emily felt a growing distance between them. Mark looked at her for a long moment before answering, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. "Yeah, just thinking. About the babies?" Emily asked softly, watching him carefully. Mark nodded, his hand absent-mindedly resting on his knee. "Yeah. I don't understand, Em. How could this happen? I mean, we've been together for so long. You and I, we've never." Emily's breath caught in her throat, her heart skipping a beat. She felt the sting of his words deep within her, but she held it together, knowing this conversation was something they had to have. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't know how it happened. I don't have all the answers. But I do know one thing, Michael is your son. Lily is your daughter. They are both ours, no matter what anyone thinks." Mark turned his head, his gaze meeting hers, but the doubt still lingered in his eyes. "I want to believe that, Emily. I do. But I don't know how could it be possible?" The silence in the room grew heavy, thick with tension. Emily tried to stay calm, but the frustration was bubbling up inside her, mixing with her hurt. She had spent so many years imagining this moment, this perfect family, and now, it felt like everything was falling apart. "It's possible because we live in a world where things don't always make sense, Mark," Emily said, her voice firm. "Where people's stories aren't always what they expect. But that doesn't mean they aren't true. Michael is your son, just like Lily is your daughter. And if you can't accept that, then I don't know what else to say." Mark's face softened, but there was still a shadow of uncertainty behind his eyes. "I'm not saying I don't love them, Em. I do. But I need to know the truth. I need to understand." Emily felt a sharp pang in her chest. The trust they had built over the years seemed to be slipping through her fingers, as if the foundation of their relationship was no longer strong enough to withstand this test. She thought about the long nights they'd spent together, the years of shared dreams and quiet moments. Could it all be undone because of this one thing? "I know you need answers," Emily said softly, her throat tight with emotion. "But what happens when we get those answers? Will you still look at them the same way? Will you still love them?" Mark didn't answer right away, his gaze drifting down to his hands. Emily couldn't help but wonder if he was already imagining a different future, one without the twins, or perhaps one where they were somehow different, more like what he expected. The thought made her stomach turn. The next few days passed in a haze of uncertainty. The tension between Emily and Mark grew thicker. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same issue, the babies, their paternity, and the looming test results. Emily found herself walking on eggshells, trying to make sure that everything she said was carefully considered. She didn't want to push him too hard, but she also didn't want to give up on them. The house felt strangely empty, even though it was filled with the sounds of crying babies and the scent of fresh laundry. Emily had always imagined that this time in her life would be full of joy and laughter. But instead, it was filled with questions, questions that she didn't have answers to. One evening, Emily found herself standing in the kitchen, staring out the window into the darkening sky. She heard Mark's footsteps behind her, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't bear to see the doubt still clouding his eyes. He said quietly, his voice almost a whisper, I want to do right by them. I want to be the father they deserve. Emily closed her eyes, her heart aching at his words. You are, Mark. You are. But right now, it feels like you're not trusting me. You're not trusting them. Mark was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I don't know what to believe anymore. Emily let out a shaky breath, turning around to face him. I know. And I don't know how we're going to get through this, but I do know that I need you to trust me. And I need you to trust that these babies, our babies, are ours. And that we'll get through this together. The room was silent for a long time, the weight of their unspoken thoughts hanging heavily between them. The doubt was still there, but so was the love. And Emily wasn't sure which one would win out in the end. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just about paternity tests. This was about something much bigger. It was about trust, love, and the future of their family. And Emily wasn't sure how it would end. But she was determined to fight for it. For her children, for Mark, and for the life they had always dreamed of. As the days dragged on, the uncertainty in the Parker household grew harder to ignore. Emily felt it most acutely at night when the house was quiet and the babies were asleep. The tension between her and Mark was palpable, and no matter how hard she tried to pretend everything was normal, she could feel the distance between them widening. Every conversation seemed to orbit around the paternity test, and every look Mark gave their son, Michael, made her heart race with fear that their relationship was beginning to fray at the edges. Then came the day the results arrived. It was a Thursday morning when Emily found the envelope in the mailbox. The small white envelope with the lab's logo printed in bold letters on the front was the kind of thing that could change everything. She held it in her hands for what felt like an eternity before she finally tore it open, her fingers trembling. Mark wasn't home yet, so she opened it alone. The moment she saw the words on the paper, she knew the answer, though it wasn't what she had expected. The test confirmed that Mark was the biological father of Lily, but Michael's paternity was marked as inconclusive. Emily's heart sank. The words seemed to blur before her eyes. Her mind raced with the implications. The paper slipped from her hands, and she stood frozen in place. She had always suspected that the answer would be difficult, but she never thought it would feel like this. She didn't know what to do with the information. She couldn't keep it from Mark, but she also wasn't sure how to break it to him. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mark, I'm on my way home. Can't wait to see you and the kids. I miss you. Emily read the text and felt an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over her. What would she say when he walked through that door? How would she even begin to tell him? She forced herself to move, slowly gathering the papers and placing them on the kitchen counter. By the time Mark arrived, she had managed to compose herself, at least on the outside. She tried to smile, but it felt like her face was made of stone. Hey, Mark greeted, his voice light, but there was a hesitation in his step as he noticed her expression. Everything okay? Emily swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat. She couldn't lie to him anymore. She took a deep breath and nodded towards the counter, where the envelope lay. The results came in, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark's face immediately changed, his eyes darting to the papers. He moved toward them, and Emily felt her heart hammer in her chest as she watched him read. He didn't speak for what felt like a lifetime, and in that silence, Emily's mind spun. Could he still look at their son the same way? Would he even be able to love him after this? Finally, Mark exhaled sharply, his hands gripping the edges of the counter. So. Michael isn't. It's inconclusive, Emily said quickly, her voice breaking. I don't understand how it could be. But they didn't say he isn't yours. They just couldn't confirm it. Mark's eyes were wide, his mouth moving, but no words came out. The shock was evident on his face, and Emily could see the wheels turning in his mind. He looked back at the paper again, then at Emily. His hands were shaking. "I don't know what to think," Mark finally said, his voice low and strained. "I don't know if I can even." "Mark, listen to me," Emily interrupted, stepping closer to him, her heart pounding. "Michael is your son. He has to be. I don't know how this happened, but I'm telling you, nothing changes. I love him just as much as I love Lily. And I need you to see him the same way. I need you to be his father." Mark turned his head, his eyes filled with a storm of emotion, confusion, pain, disbelief. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. His gaze shifted toward the crib, where Michael slept soundly, completely unaware of the turmoil swirling around him. Emily took a step back and sighed, her voice cracking with emotion. "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect any of this. But he's ours, Mark. He's yours." Mark ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenched. "I want to believe you, I do. But I need time, Em. This is a lot. It's a lot to take in." The words hung between them like a cloud, heavy and dark. Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation, the impossibility of the dilemma before them. She wanted to believe that they could work through this, but the doubt in Mark's eyes, those tiny glimmers of uncertainty, were hard to ignore. She felt herself retreating inward. She had wanted to believe that this would be a perfect family, her perfect family, but now everything felt like a fragile house of cards, just waiting to fall apart. In the days that followed, Emily and Mark found themselves caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Mark spent more time at work, and when he was home, the distance between them was palpable. There were no more late-night conversations about their future, no more planning for the twins' first birthday or their first family vacation. Instead, Emily found herself caring for the babies alone, as Mark slipped further away. The worst part was the silence. The silence between them was deafening, and it gnawed at Emily every time she looked at her children. She knew that Mark was trying to process everything, but she couldn't help feeling that the longer he stayed away, the harder it would be for them to heal. One night, as Emily stood at the kitchen sink washing the dishes, she heard Mark's voice from the living room. He was talking on the phone, his voice low, but the words were unmistakable. "Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I can do this. She keeps saying that Michael is mine, but I'm just not sure anymore." Emily's stomach twisted as she listened to his words, a sharp pang of hurt radiating through her chest. She set the dish down slowly, her hand trembling. It was the first time she had heard him express his doubts so openly, and the sound of it shattered her. She closed her eyes and let the tears fall, the quiet sobs racking her body. She had never felt so alone. The next few days felt like a blur. Emily tried to reach out to Mark, but every attempt seemed to be met with a cold distance. She couldn't blame him for his confusion, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. And when she finally sat him down to have a serious conversation, she felt like the world was pressing down on her. "I can't keep pretending like everything's okay," she said, her voice breaking. "I know you have doubts, and I understand that. But I can't do this alone, Mark. I need you. The kids need you." Mark was silent for a long time, his eyes filled with sadness and confusion. "I don't know if I'm enough for them, Em. I don't know if I can get past this." But Emily wasn't sure if they could go on like this anymore. She had fought so hard for their love, for their family, but now it felt like everything was unraveling. The uncertainty was tearing them apart, and Emily didn't know how much more she could take. The next few days felt like walking through a storm. Every time Emily looked at Mark, she could see the distance between them, a chasm that seemed impossible to cross. He was there physically, but emotionally, he was gone. The house felt empty, even when it was filled with the sounds of crying babies and the soft hum of the washing machine in the background. Emily felt like she was carrying the weight of everything on her shoulders, and each day, the burden grew heavier. She found herself in the nursery one evening, standing over Michael's crib, watching him sleep. His tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, completely unaware of the turmoil that was consuming his parents. Emily felt a pang in her heart. She loved him so much. He was her son, no matter what the test said. And yet, in Mark's eyes, she could feel the doubt lingering, like a shadow that refused to go away. The worst part was that she didn't know how to fix it. Every time she reached out to Mark, he pulled away. Every time she tried to talk to him about the babies, about their future, the conversation turned into a battleground. Emily knew that Mark needed time, but how much time could they afford to lose? It was one of those late-night moments when everything finally broke open. Mark came home from work later than usual, his face tired, his eyes dark. Emily had just finished feeding the babies and was sitting in the living room, trying to keep herself together. When Mark walked in, she didn't even have to look at him to know that something was different. The air between them was thick with unresolved tension. Mark said quietly, standing in the doorway. He didn't come any closer, just watched her from a distance. "I need to talk." Emily looked up at him, her heart racing. "I'm listening." Mark hesitated, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his shoulders slumped in exhaustion. "I've been thinking, a lot. About everything. About the twins. About us." Emily's breath hitched in her chest. She had no idea what he was going to say, but she knew it wasn't going to be easy. "I don't want to lose you," Mark continued, his voice almost a whisper. "I don't want to lose this family. But I don't know how to get past this. I don't know how to stop doubting, Emily. Every time I look at Michael, I see. I don't know, confusion. I see a child who doesn't look like me. And I don't know how to fix that. How do we fix that?" Emily's heart cracked as she listened to his words. The pain in his voice was raw, and it echoed in the depths of her own heart. She knew this wasn't just about the test results anymore. This was about the trust between them. This was about the fear of the unknown, the fear of not being enough, of not being able to protect their family from the things that threatened to tear them apart. Tears filled Emily's eyes, and she struggled to find the right words. She needed him to understand, needed him to see that it wasn't about paternity tests or appearances. It was about love. It was about them, as a family, finding a way to make it work. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I know you're scared. I know this is hard. But Michael is your son. I don't care what the tests say. I don't care what anyone else thinks. He is yours. He is ours. We brought him into this world together, and that's all that matters. I know it's not what we expected, but that doesn't change anything. I love him. And I need you to love him too." Mark stood there in silence, his eyes searching her face as if looking for something, an answer, perhaps, or a sign that everything would be okay. But the truth was, Emily didn't have the answers. She only had faith, and that was something she could only share with him if he was willing to take it. "I don't know if I can, Mark said, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I can ever see him the way I see Lily. She's mine. I know that. But Michael. I can't stop thinking about how different he is. How everything about this is so wrong." Emily stood up slowly, wiping the tears from her cheeks. She couldn't hold back the pain anymore. She couldn't pretend everything was okay when it felt like everything was crumbling. "I know it's hard," she said softly, her voice filled with an ache she couldn't hide. "But you're his father. You are. And I can't do this alone, Mark. I need you to step up. For him. For me. For us." Mark's gaze dropped to the floor, his chest rising and falling with each deep breath. He was silent for a long moment, and Emily wasn't sure if he would ever say anything again. Then, in a soft voice, he finally spoke. "I'm scared, Em. I don't know how to be the father Michael needs. I don't know how to make this right." Emily stepped toward him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to be here. For him. For me. We can figure this out together." Mark looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily saw a glimmer of hope in his gaze. He wasn't sure of everything yet, but he was willing to try. And that was enough for her. The silence that had once been suffocating began to lift, and for the first time in days, Emily felt like they were on the same page. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And that, she realized, was all they needed to begin rebuilding their family. As the night wore on, Emily and Mark sat together, side by side, in the living room. They didn't talk much after that, but the tension between them had eased. They were no longer standing on opposite sides of a chasm. They were together, in the same place, both uncertain but willing to fight for what mattered most. The road ahead would still be difficult. They had a long way to go, and many challenges to face. But Emily knew one thing for sure, they would get through this. Together. Because love, she realized, was never about having all the answers. It was about choosing to stay, even when the questions were too difficult to answer. The days following their conversation were filled with small steps, tentative attempts at rebuilding what had felt irreparably broken. Mark's skepticism didn't vanish overnight, but it softened. Slowly, he began to re-engage with Emily, with the babies. There were no grand gestures, no sudden epiphanies. But there was a shift, a subtle, yet undeniable shift. He was trying. The first sign of progress came when Mark took Michael in his arms one evening. The baby was fussing, and Emily was in the middle of cleaning the kitchen, feeling the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. She heard Mark's voice, soft and hesitant, from the living room. "Come on, buddy. Let's see if we can figure this out together." Emily froze for a moment, her heart swelling in her chest. She turned, her gaze falling on Mark as he gently rocked Michael in his arms. The sight of them, father and son, sharing a quiet moment, was like a balm to her wounded heart. It wasn't perfect, Mark was still uncertain, still struggling with the questions that loomed over him, but it was a start. As the days went by, Mark grew more comfortable in his role as Michael's father. It wasn't always easy for him to let go of the doubts that still whispered in his mind, but Emily saw him trying. And that effort meant everything. There were moments of hesitation, moments where Emily could feel the weight of the past bearing down on him, but there were also moments where she saw the tenderness return to his eyes, the softness in his touch when he held Michael or Lily. For Emily, it was a slow process of healing, of learning how to forgive herself for the uncertainty she had carried, and how to trust again that love could overcome even the most challenging of obstacles. She'd always believed in the power of love, had always been certain that it could heal, transform, and redeem. But now, she realized, she needed to believe in herself too. She had to trust that she could lead their family through the storm and emerge stronger on the other side. A week after their conversation, Emily suggested they take the babies to the park for a walk. It was a simple plan, nothing extravagant, but Emily knew that spending time together in the fresh air, away from the house and its tensions, might help them reconnect. Mark agreed, though there was still a quiet apprehension in his eyes. He wasn't entirely at ease, but Emily could see that he was trying, that he wanted to make it work. That was all she needed for now. As they strolled through the park, with Lily in her stroller and Michael nestled against Mark's chest in a baby carrier, Emily felt a peace she hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The tension between her and Mark had shifted, softened. There was still uncertainty, but there was also love, and that love was what would carry them forward. Later that evening, as the babies settled into bed, Emily and Mark sat together on the couch, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The silence wasn't oppressive this time, it was comfortable, filled with the quiet hum of shared understanding. "I've been thinking a lot," Mark said after a long pause, breaking the stillness between them. He looked over at Emily, his eyes soft, no longer filled with the same doubt they had carried before. About Michael. About us. And I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. He's my son. I may not have all the answers, but I can see now that it doesn't matter what a test says. It matters that we love him, and we love each other. Emily's heart lifted, a smile tugging at her lips. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment when Mark would fully embrace the truth that Michael was his, no matter what. But now that it was here, she realized it didn't matter how long it had taken for him to get there. What mattered was that they had arrived together. I'm glad, Emily whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I know this hasn't been easy. For either of us. But we're in this together, Mark. And that's all that matters. Mark nodded, his hand reaching out to take hers. The gesture was simple, but it spoke volumes. It was a promise, one of commitment, of togetherness, of hope for the future. And in that moment, Emily realized that they were going to be okay. They would rebuild their family, brick by brick, and even though the road ahead would still have its challenges, they would face them together. The following weeks brought a renewed sense of unity to the Parker family. The tension that had once defined their home slowly dissipated, replaced by laughter, love, and a sense of peace. Mark had taken on his role as a father with newfound determination, and Emily, too, had found the strength to trust that they could overcome any obstacle. Though the scars of their past struggles still lingered, they had come to understand that healing wasn't about erasing the pain, it was about growing from it, learning from it, and moving forward. Michael and Lily were growing rapidly, their personalities emerging in beautiful, unexpected ways. And while their family wasn't perfect, Emily knew that they were exactly where they needed to be. In the quiet moments, Emily would catch Mark gazing at their children with a tenderness that melted her heart. She knew that their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step. And in those moments, when she saw the love in Mark's eyes, she knew that their family had emerged from the storm stronger than ever. For Emily, the greatest lesson she had learned through this entire ordeal was that love wasn't a simple equation. It wasn't about DNA tests or appearances, it was about choice. Love was a choice, every single day. And she had chosen to love her family, to choose forgiveness, and to trust that even in the midst of uncertainty, love would always guide them home. As the sun set on another day, Emily looked out the window, her heart filled with hope. There was still a long road ahead, but she no longer feared it. Together, they could handle anything. The warmth of the evening sun bathed the Parker household in a golden hue, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to truly relax. The tension that had plagued her for so long had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding that things were finally falling into place. The past few weeks had been filled with small victories, moments where Emily saw Mark engage with Michael and Lily in ways that felt new, but also like a return to what had always been possible. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was theirs to walk together. As she sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, Emily's mind drifted to the future. The road ahead was uncertain, and there were still whispers of doubt that lingered in the back of her mind. Would things always be this hard? Would they ever fully heal from the cracks that had formed between them? Emily didn't have all the answers, but she had hope. Hope that, with each passing day, their family could continue to rebuild, brick by brick, until they were stronger than ever. It was then that Mark entered the room, a soft smile on his face as he held a cup of coffee in his hands. He didn't need to say anything, just the sight of him, walking toward her with a calmness in his demeanor, was enough. They had come a long way. And while the journey wasn't over, they had already made it through the worst of it. I was thinking, Mark began, pulling out a chair and sitting down beside her. His voice was steady, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that Emily recognized. He was still processing, still unsure at times, but he was trying. And that effort meant everything to her. Maybe we should consider therapy. I know it's not easy, but I think it could help. For both of us. We've been through a lot, and I don't want this to break us. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Therapy was something they'd both avoided for so long, unsure of what it might reveal or how it would affect their relationship. But hearing Mark's suggestion filled her with relief. It was the first time since everything had happened that she truly felt he was taking proactive steps to heal, not just for himself, but for their family. That sounds like a good idea, she said softly, her voice tinged with gratitude. I think we both need it. I want to make sure we're not carrying any more weight than we need to. For the kids, for us, it'll help. Mark nodded, the weight of their past struggles hanging heavy in the air between them, but there was a new sense of possibility. They had both realized that healing didn't mean forgetting the pain, it meant working through it together, facing their fears head-on, and coming out the other side stronger. Therapy wasn't a cure-all, but it was a step in the right direction. The next few weeks were a mix of adjustment and reflection. Mark and Emily attended their first therapy session, the room filled with silence at first as they both struggled to find the right words. Their therapist, Dr. Daniels, was kind but firm, helping them navigate the delicate balance between acknowledging the hurt and learning how to move forward. It wasn't easy, but each session offered small revelations. Emily began to see how deeply Mark's doubt had affected him, how much he had internalized the fear that he wasn't enough for their children, especially Michael. And Mark, in turn, began to understand the depth of Emily's emotional labor, the quiet strength she had put forth to hold their family together. The therapy sessions weren't magic, and they didn't solve everything overnight, but they began to crack open the walls that had been built between them. They learned how to communicate more openly, how to express their needs and fears without the weight of shame or blame. Slowly but surely, they began to remember what it was like to be partners in this journey, not adversaries. And it was in these quiet moments of rebuilding that Emily saw the first real glimpses of the love they had always shared, albeit in a different form, one that had been tested and tempered by the storm they had weathered. One afternoon, as Emily was folding laundry, Mark came into the room with Michael on his hip, the baby's giggles filling the air. Emily smiled at the sight, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Got a minute?" Mark asked, his tone casual but carrying a hint of something more. "Of course," Emily said, setting aside the laundry basket and walking over to them. "What's up?" Mark shifted Michael in his arms, adjusting the baby so he was facing Emily. Michael cooed and grabbed at the collar of Mark's shirt, giggling as he tugged at it. Mark smiled, watching his son with affection. "I've been thinking," Mark began, his voice hesitant, "about the future. I know it's still early to be making plans, but I want to be a better father, Emily. For both of them. And I think that means making some changes in my life, more time with the kids, more time with you. I want us to have a future that's full of love, not fear." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the weight of the decision he was making to invest more of himself into their family. It wasn't something she had expected, but it was exactly what they both needed. "I want that too," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I know we've been through a lot, but I believe in us. I believe in our family." Mark's gaze softened, and he reached out to touch her hand. "We'll get there, Em. Together. One step at a time." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and love. There was so much still ahead, but she no longer feared it. She no longer feared what their future might hold because she knew they could face it, together. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and Mark continued their journey of healing. The therapy sessions helped, but it was their commitment to each other and their family that truly made the difference. They celebrated small victories along the way, each step forward reinforcing the strength of their bond. They learned how to be vulnerable, how to forgive, how to grow. They watched their children grow as well, Michael, with his bright eyes and infectious laugh, and Lily, who was now walking and talking, her curiosity endless. Their family was not perfect, but it was theirs, and they loved it fiercely. Emily had learned that love wasn't about having everything figured out, it was about the willingness to try, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the willingness to show up every single day, even when things felt uncertain. It was about the moments of connection, the quiet gestures, the shared laughter and tears. And with each passing day, Emily and Mark found that the road ahead wasn't so daunting after all. They had each other, and that was enough. It had been nearly a year since Emily and Mark had begun the process of rebuilding their relationship. While the road to recovery hadn't been without its bumps, they had emerged stronger, more united, and more determined than ever to create a family filled with love and understanding. The foundation they were building had finally started to feel solid again, no longer shaking beneath the weight of doubt and insecurity. The house was quieter these days, the kind of peaceful quiet that comes when you've worked through the hardest parts of your life and now simply enjoy the moments that matter. It was early morning, and the sun was filtering through the curtains of their bedroom, casting a soft, golden light across the room. Emily lay next to Mark, the sound of their children's giggles drifting up from the living room. She smiled, her heart swelling with love for the family they had created. Lily's laughter echoed particularly loud. She was getting older, now 3 years old, and had developed quite the personality. She was curious, independent, and full of energy, often asking endless questions that left Emily scrambling for answers. Michael, at 2, was starting to talk in full sentences and could already say things like "Mama" and "Dada" with a sense of pride. Both of them were growing so fast, and Emily often found herself caught in a mix of nostalgia and awe at how quickly time was passing. "You're up early," Mark said softly, his voice still thick with sleep as he turned to face her. He reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle and familiar. Emily smiled, her eyes meeting his. "I had a lot on my mind." Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly curious, but said nothing as he let her speak when she was ready. He had come to understand that about her, Emily processed her thoughts best in quiet moments, with time to let everything settle before sharing. "I was thinking about how far we've come," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "About where we were a year ago and where we are now. It feels different, Mark. It feels like we've really started to heal." Mark's expression softened, and he nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it does. I think we're finally finding our footing. It's been a long road, but we're making it. I've learned so much over the past year," Emily continued, her eyes beginning to fill with emotion. "About love, about forgiveness, and about myself. I thought I knew everything I needed to know. But this has changed me. It's changed us." Mark reached for her hand, squeezing it in reassurance. He didn't need to say anything because he understood. Their journey had been difficult, but the love they had for their children and for each other had carried them through even the darkest moments. "Do you think we're ready for what's next?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The question hung in the air between them, its weight not lost on either of them. Emily and Mark had discussed expanding their family more than once over the past few months, but the decision had always felt too daunting to make. After everything they had been through, they both needed time to truly heal before they could even think about adding another child into the mix. Mark paused for a moment, deep in thought. "I think we're closer than we were before. But it's not just about being ready. It's about being willing to grow, together, through whatever comes next." Emily's heart warmed at his words. He was right. It wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment, it was about facing the future with open hearts and hands, ready to take whatever came their way. Before she could say anything more, the sound of footsteps running through the hallway broke the moment. Lily appeared in the doorway, her small face lighting up with excitement. "Mama! Dada!" she called out, her voice full of joy. "I made something." Emily sat up, smiling at her daughter's energy. "What did you make, sweetie?" Lily held up a piece of paper, crayon scribbles scattered across it. It wasn't much, a simple drawing, really, but to Lily, it was a masterpiece. She hopped onto the bed next to Emily, holding the drawing out for her to admire. "I made a picture of our family," Lily exclaimed, beaming. "It's us, and we're all together." Mark and Emily both looked at the picture, their eyes meeting briefly before returning to the crayon-filled page. In Lily's drawing, their family was represented by stick figures, each holding hands, surrounded by hearts. It was a simple, innocent rendering of the love and unity that Lily felt so strongly. Emily's chest tightened with emotion. She couldn't help but think how lucky they were, how fortunate they were to have come so far after everything. "That's beautiful, sweetie," Emily said, leaning down to kiss her daughter's cheek. "You're such a good artist." Lily's eyes sparkled with pride. "I'm going to be an artist when I grow up." Mark chuckled softly, brushing his daughter's hair out of her face. "I think that's a great idea, kiddo." The moment was so simple, yet so perfect. Emily glanced over at Mark again, seeing the same mixture of pride and love reflected in his eyes as he looked at their children. This was their life now, messy, loud, and full of love. It was everything they had fought for and so much more than they could have imagined when they first faced their greatest challenge. As the day progressed, Emily found herself reflecting on the years to come. She had no idea what the future held, none of them did, but she felt ready. Ready for more challenges, ready for more joy, ready for whatever came their way. They had learned how to be a family through the toughest moments. And now, with the foundation of trust and love they had built, they could face whatever was next, together. Later that afternoon, Emily and Mark sat down together after putting the kids down for a nap. The house was quiet again, and they took the time to check in with each other. "We've made it this far, Mark," Emily said, her voice filled with hope. "Whatever happens next, I know we can face it together." Mark reached for her hand, his expression serious but filled with love. "We've been through the hardest parts. And if we can survive that, we can survive anything." They sat there for a while, hands intertwined, hearts in sync. The future, once so uncertain, now felt full of possibility. And though they didn't know exactly what that future would look like, they knew they would face it side by side, as a family. Months had passed since Emily and Mark had decided to take their family's future into their own hands. Therapy had helped, their bond had grown stronger, and even though they were still finding their footing, they felt a sense of unity that hadn't existed before. They were stronger as a couple and as a family, but the looming question of whether their healing would last still hung in the air like a cloud. Despite their progress, challenges were inevitable. No one's life was without obstacles. And just when Emily thought they were on the cusp of something stable, something else happened to shake them to their core. It started with a routine doctor's appointment. Emily hadn't expected anything out of the ordinary. She'd gone in to get a checkup, something she'd done many times before, but this time was different. Her doctor had asked her to stay a little longer after the exam, her expression unreadable. "Emily," Dr. Roberts said, her voice gentle but serious, "I'd like to discuss the results of your blood tests." Emily's stomach dropped. She'd had a regular blood workup done just to stay on top of her health, but now, her body stiffened, and an inexplicable fear crept up. She nodded, trying to keep calm. "What is it? Is everything okay?" Dr. Roberts hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's not something we need to panic about, but there's an issue I need to bring to your attention. Your hormone levels are showing irregularities. I recommend some follow-up testing. We want to make sure everything is balanced and that there's no underlying condition." Emily nodded again, but the weight of her doctor's words settled in her mind like a knot she couldn't untie. Irregular hormone levels. What did that mean for her health, for her ability to have more children? It wasn't something she had planned to worry about. Their family felt complete with Michael and Lily, but the idea of more children was always floating in the back of her mind. She couldn't ignore that they had talked about it before. What if this meant it wouldn't be possible? After the appointment, she drove home in a daze, the words, "irregular hormones," replaying in her head over and over again. When she pulled into the driveway, she was met with the sight of Mark chasing after Michael, who had somehow escaped from the house again. Lily was sitting on the porch steps, coloring, oblivious to the chaos unfolding just a few feet away. Mark caught sight of Emily's car and waved, his face breaking into a grin as he picked up Michael and brought him inside. Emily watched them, feeling a knot tighten in her chest. She didn't want to tell Mark just yet. Not while they were both still processing so much. She didn't know how to break the news that there was a possibility she might not be able to have more children. The thought weighed heavily on her, making it hard to breathe. That evening, when the kids were finally in bed, Mark came to sit next to her on the couch. He noticed immediately that something was off. What's going on? You've been quiet all day, he asked gently. Emily opened her mouth to respond but found that the words caught in her throat. She wasn't sure how to start, how to explain the uncertainty in her heart. But she knew she couldn't hide it from him any longer. He had been with her through every storm, he deserved to know what she was facing now. Mark, she began, her voice trembling slightly, I went to the doctor today. It's nothing urgent, but there's a possibility that something's wrong with my hormones. I need to do more tests to see what's going on, but it might be difficult for me to have more children. The silence that followed was thick. Mark's expression was unreadable, and Emily could feel the heaviness of the moment settle over them both. The air in the room felt suffocating, and for a few moments, neither of them said anything. Mark took a deep breath before finally speaking. Emily, I don't know what to say. This is a lot to take in. I know, she whispered, feeling tears prickle at the back of her eyes. I didn't expect this. We've talked about having more kids, and I thought it was something we could decide together, but now I'm scared. Mark reached for her hand, his touch grounding her in the moment. We've been through a lot, Em. And whatever happens with the tests, we'll handle it. If we can't have more children, then we'll make sure Michael and Lily have everything they need. We'll be a family, no matter what. His words, simple yet powerful, felt like a balm to Emily's worried heart. She had been so focused on the possibility of a future with more children that she had forgotten the truth that had carried them through their darkest days: their love was enough. Their family was enough. And no matter what the future held, they would face it together, as they always had. I want to be able to give you more, Emily confessed, her voice breaking. I want to be the woman you need. I want to give you the family we've dreamed of. Mark cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. You've already given me everything I need. You and the kids, our family, is everything I've ever wanted. Whatever happens, we'll be okay. The weight in her chest began to lift, replaced by the warmth of Mark's words. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone in this. The next few weeks were filled with more tests and doctor visits. Emily's nerves were on edge as the results came in, but with every appointment, Mark stood by her side, offering his support in ways she had never imagined possible. I can't believe it, Emily whispered to Mark that evening. Everything's going to be okay. Mark kissed her forehead, his smile warm and genuine. I knew it would be. We just needed to take it one day at a time. As the days passed, the fear that had once held Emily captive began to fade into the background. They had faced another test together, and once again, they had come through it stronger. Emily realized, as she looked at Mark and their children, that it wasn't about the number of children they had. It was about the love they shared, the family they had created. And with that, she knew they were ready for whatever came next. The next few months passed in a flurry of activity. Emily and Mark were more focused than ever on their children, on their relationship, and on ensuring that their family remained as strong as possible. It was a time of normalcy, of simple joys that, for so long, had been absent from their lives. They enjoyed quiet evenings, family dinners, and outings to the park. It was the kind of life they had worked so hard to build. But even in the quiet moments, life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. It all began on a chilly autumn afternoon, when Emily received an unexpected call. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee while flipping through a magazine, when the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" she said, holding the receiver to her ear. "Hi, is this Emily Evans?" a voice asked. It was a woman's voice, calm and somewhat distant. "Yes, speaking," Emily replied, her curiosity piqued. "This is Jenna Hayes," the woman continued. "I'm calling because I'm looking for Mark Evans. I need to speak with him." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Mark's name, especially coming from a stranger, felt like a sharp reminder of the past they had tried so hard to leave behind. "May I ask what this is regarding?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Jenna spoke again. "I realize this might sound strange, but I believe I'm your husband's half-sister. I know this is a lot to ask, but I would like to meet with him, if that's possible." The words hit Emily like a tidal wave. Half-sister. Mark had never mentioned anything about having a sibling. He'd grown up in a small, tight-knit family with just his parents and his brother, Tom, who was the same age as him. This was the first time anyone had ever brought up another relative, and the revelation was nothing short of shocking. Before Emily could respond, Jenna quickly added, "I understand if you need time to process this. I'm not looking to disrupt anyone's life, but I just wanted to reach out. I've been trying to find him for years." "Mark doesn't know about you?" Emily asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "No," Jenna replied softly. I wasn't raised with him. My mother had a relationship with Mark's father when they were both young, but they parted ways, and my mother never told me about him. I only recently found out about Mark's family, and I just wanted to know more." Emily felt a mixture of emotions, confusion, disbelief, curiosity, and she wasn't sure how to process it all. She wanted to respect Mark's privacy, but at the same time, this was a major development in their lives. A half-sister. This could change everything. "I'll have Mark call you," Emily finally said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. "But just so you know, this is going to be a big conversation for him. It might take him some time to process this as well." "Of course. I completely understand," Jenna responded. "Thank you for listening. I'll be waiting for his call." The conversation ended, but Emily sat frozen in her chair, trying to make sense of it all. She wasn't sure what to do next, but one thing was clear, this would change everything. Mark didn't know about this woman, and that was a secret someone had kept from him for years. When Mark came home later that evening, Emily had already made up her mind to tell him. She wasn't sure how he would react, but she knew this was something that couldn't wait. He walked through the front door, his arms full of groceries, and greeted Emily with a smile. "Hey, hon. How was your day?" Emily tried to return the smile, but her face must have been a bit too serious, because Mark immediately stopped what he was doing and raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting the bags down on the kitchen counter. "Mark, we need to talk," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "I got a phone call today. From a woman named Jenna Hayes. She says she's your half-sister." Mark froze, his expression blank for a moment. His gaze seemed to search her face, trying to gauge whether she was joking or if she was serious. "My half-sister?" Mark asked, his voice quiet and confused. "What are you talking about?" Emily nodded. "That's what she said. She said she was looking for you, and that she found out about you recently. She said your father had a relationship with her mother when they were young, but they never told her about you. She's been trying to reach you for years, Mark." Mark's face turned pale, his expression a mix of disbelief and shock. I don't know what to say. I didn't even know she existed." Emily stood up and walked over to him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "I know this is a lot to take in. She's not trying to disrupt your life, Mark. She just wants to meet you, to know who you are." Mark rubbed his forehead, as if trying to process the whirlwind of information that had just been dropped on him. I can't believe this. I've always known about my mom and dad, but, a half-sister. This changes everything. I know, Emily said softly, but whatever you decide, I'm here for you. Mark let out a deep sigh, then turned toward the counter, staring at the grocery bags as if they could offer him some kind of answers. I don't know what to do. I don't even know if I want to meet her. I think you should, Emily said, her voice gentle but firm. She reached out because she wants to get to know you. She's not trying to replace anyone, Mark. But this could be an important part of your past, and I think you should hear her out. Mark looked at her, his eyes searching for reassurance. I'm scared, Em. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Emily took his hand and squeezed it gently. It's okay to be scared. But you don't have to do this alone. We'll figure it out, together. For the first time that day, Mark managed a small, hesitant smile. Together. Yeah, we'll figure it out. That night, as they lay in bed, Emily could feel the uncertainty hanging in the air. Mark had promised to reach out to Jenna, but it was clear that this new twist in their story wasn't something that would be easily resolved. It would take time, perhaps even more than they were ready for. But Emily knew one thing for sure, whatever happened next, they would face it as a family. They would navigate this unexpected chapter together, just as they always had. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Mark had spent the past few days in a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to process the news about his half-sister. Jenna's phone call had shaken him to his core, and despite the support Emily offered, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental about his life was about to change. It wasn't that he didn't want to know his sister, it was more that he didn't know how to incorporate this new piece of his past into his already complicated present. But he had promised Emily that he would reach out. And so, after a few days of pacing and wrestling with his emotions, he finally dialed Jenna's number, his hands slightly trembling as he pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before she answered. Mark? Yeah, it's me, he said, his voice unsure. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Mark could almost hear Jenna taking a deep breath before speaking. I didn't think you'd call. I almost didn't, he admitted, his words coming out more bluntly than he intended. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start. I understand, Jenna replied, her voice calm but tinged with a sense of relief. I didn't mean to surprise you like this, but I've been searching for you for years. I just wanted to know who you were, if you'd be open to it. Mark felt the weight of her words. She had been searching for him for years. He couldn't even begin to fathom what that must have felt like for her, searching for a brother she didn't even know existed, and now, here he was, unsure how to respond. I guess the first question is, why now? Mark finally asked. Why reach out to me now? Jenna hesitated before answering. I found out about you a few months ago. My mom told me the truth about my father's past, and it was just a shock. I didn't know how to process it. But I had to try. I had to know you, Mark. I didn't want to go through life wondering. Mark ran a hand through his hair, feeling more conflicted than ever. The past few days had been a blur of conflicting emotions, guilt, curiosity, confusion. He had always thought of his family as small and simple, and now, this new revelation had complicated everything. I'm not sure what to say, Mark finally admitted, his voice quiet. I never knew about you. I didn't even know our father was involved with your mom. Jenna's voice softened. I know. I didn't want to intrude on your life. I just thought, maybe we could meet. Talk. If that's something you want. Mark let out a deep breath, glancing over at Emily, who had been silently watching him from across the room. He could see the concern in her eyes, but there was also a sense of quiet support. She had been his rock through everything, this was just another hurdle to navigate together. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mark confessed. I don't know what this means for me, for us. You don't have to be ready now, Jenna replied. I just wanted to let you know that I'm here. Whenever you're ready. No pressure. Mark closed his eyes, trying to steady his nerves. He had no idea what this would mean for his future or how he was supposed to feel about it. But he knew one thing for sure, he couldn't keep avoiding it. The past had caught up with him, and it was time to face it. I'll think about it, he said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. But I can't promise anything. I understand, Jenna said, her voice filled with patience. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. With a quiet goodbye, Mark hung up the phone. He sat there for a moment, staring at the device in his hand, trying to collect his thoughts. Are you okay? Emily's voice broke through the silence. Mark looked up at her, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. I don't know. It's just, a lot, you know. I never imagined something like this. I didn't even know I had a sister. Emily stood up and walked over to him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. I can't even imagine what you're feeling right now. But I'm here. Whatever you need, we'll figure this out together. He nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. I don't know if I'm ready for this kind of relationship. What if it's just too much to handle? What if it changes everything? Emily smiled softly. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? But whatever happens, it's up to you to decide what this means. And I'll be by your side every step of the way. Mark let out a breath, feeling the weight of his emotions begin to lift, if only slightly. He didn't have answers. He didn't even know what the future held. But with Emily by his side, he felt a little more prepared to face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. Mark spent a lot of time alone, wrestling with his thoughts, while Emily tried her best to give him space while also offering support. She knew this wasn't just a simple family reunion. This was a life-altering event. And as much as she wanted to encourage Mark to take the leap and meet his sister, she also knew he needed to come to that decision on his own. Finally, after several days of thinking it over, Mark made up his mind. He needed to meet Jenna, even if he wasn't sure where it would lead. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about understanding his past, understanding who he was, and what his family had been before him. He called Jenna back. This time, when he spoke, there was a newfound resolve in his voice. I'm ready to meet you, he said. I don't know what this means yet, but I'm willing to take the first step. Jenna's response was immediate, her voice filled with emotion. Thank you, Mark. I've waited so long for this. Mark felt a strange sense of relief, knowing he was finally facing a piece of his past that he hadn't even known existed. This wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to try. It was time to meet Jenna. Time to see where this unexpected chapter would lead. Mark spent the next few days preparing for his meeting with Jenna. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew this moment was inevitable. The call had been made, the decision had been made, and now, it was time to face this new chapter of his life. The day of the meeting arrived, and Mark found himself pacing the living room, his hands sweaty, his heart pounding. Emily had been his rock throughout this entire process, but even her comforting presence didn't erase the anxiety gnawing at him. This wasn't just a normal family reunion. This was someone who had been hidden from him for years, someone whose existence had been kept from him by a past he didn't fully understand. There were too many questions, too many uncertainties. Emily could tell how on edge he was. Hey, let's take a deep breath together, okay? She said, gently guiding him to the couch. Whatever happens, we're in this together. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Mark nodded, closing his eyes for a moment to steady his breath. I don't know if I'm ready for this. What if it changes everything? It won't change who you are, Emily said, her voice calm and reassuring. But maybe it will help you understand yourself better. And it might help Jenna, too. She's not the enemy here. She's your sister. And we both know how important family can be. Mark smiled faintly at her support. She always knew what to say to calm him, to make him feel like he could face anything. But this? This was something different. He checked the time on his phone. It was almost time to meet Jenna. He had arranged to meet her at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town, a neutral ground for both of them. Neither of them knew what to expect, so they had agreed that this first meeting should be simple. Just coffee. Just conversation. As he arrived at the cafe, Mark's nerves intensified. He stood outside for a moment, staring at the door, wondering if he was doing the right thing. A part of him wanted to run. Another part of him wanted to dive in head first and ask all the questions he had been carrying around for years. But, as always, Emily's words echoed in his mind, "You don't have to have all the answers right now." With a deep breath, Mark pushed open the door and stepped inside. He quickly scanned the room and saw Jenna sitting at a table in the far corner. She was looking down at her phone, seemingly lost in thought. She was younger than Mark had imagined, late 20s, maybe early 30s, with shoulder-length dark hair and an easy smile that gave off a vibe of warmth. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment for a long time, yet wasn't sure what it would bring. Mark's heart raced as he walked toward her, and when she looked up and saw him, her eyes lit up. He could see the relief in her face, mixed with a hint of nervousness. She stood up, and for a brief moment, neither of them knew what to say. "Mark?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Yeah," he said, his voice equally soft. "I'm Mark." A smile broke across Jenna's face, and she held out her hand. I don't know what to say. I've imagined this moment so many times, but now that it's actually here, it feels surreal." Mark hesitated before shaking her hand. He didn't know what to make of the situation. He didn't know how he was supposed to feel. But he knew that, for better or worse, this was happening. "Yeah, me too," he admitted, pulling out a chair to sit down across from her. "It's a lot." They both sat in silence for a moment, unsure of how to start. Jenna cleared her throat before speaking again, her voice full of vulnerability. "I don't want to make this awkward, but I feel like I should just be honest with you. I'm not here to disrupt your life. I just want to understand who you are, Mark. I've spent my whole life wondering about you, and I just thought maybe we could connect." Mark looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. She wasn't the stranger he had assumed she would be. There was something in her eyes, something familiar. He could see the same mix of hope and uncertainty in her that he had felt since he first learned about her. She was real. She was part of his past, his blood, and now, she was sitting across from him, waiting to see where this strange journey would lead. "I get that," Mark said slowly. "I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I don't know where this is going either. I didn't even know you existed until a week ago." Jenna nodded, understanding. "I know. I didn't mean to shock you. But I've spent years trying to find you, Mark. I just wanted to know my family. I wanted to know you. It's hard to explain, but I think part of me has always felt like something was missing. And now, I know why." Mark stared down at the table, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. This was his reality now, a reality he hadn't asked for but was facing nonetheless. Jenna wasn't some stranger, she was his family. And somehow, despite all the shock and confusion, he knew there was no going back. "I don't know if I'm ready for a sister," Mark admitted, finally looking up at her. "I'm not sure what that means, or if I even know how to do that." Jenna's eyes softened with empathy. "I don't expect anything from you, Mark. I just want to be part of your life, even if it's just a small part. Maybe we can start slow, see where this goes. I just wanted the chance to meet you, and I'm glad we're here now." Mark felt his chest tighten. He hadn't expected to feel so moved. This wasn't just about curiosity or some family obligation. This was about someone who had spent years wanting to know him, wanting to understand a piece of their shared history. And while he didn't know what the future held, he realized, maybe, just maybe, there was room for Jenna in his life. "Okay," Mark said, his voice steady. "Let's start slow. We'll figure this out together." A smile spread across Jenna's face, a smile that spoke volumes about the hope she'd been holding onto for so long. For the first time since he'd met her, Mark felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he was willing to find out. The meeting with Jenna had gone better than Mark expected. There were no dramatic confrontations, no demands, no tears, just two people trying to figure out what they meant to each other. But even though it ended with a promise to stay in touch and take things slow, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something about all of this still didn't add up. That night, back home, he sat on the couch with Emily, their twins asleep upstairs. The house was quiet, but his thoughts were loud. She was kind. Calm. "Not weird or anything," Mark said, staring off toward the fireplace. "But the whole thing, it still feels off." Emily tucked her legs beneath her and leaned in. "What do you mean?" "She said she found out about me recently, that her mom told her the truth. But there were little things she mentioned, like how she knew my dad's name, our old address in Sacramento, and even Tom's middle name." He paused. "I never asked how she got all that." Emily tilted her head, thoughtful. "So you think she's not telling the whole truth?" "I'm not saying she's lying. I just think, there's more." Emily was quiet for a moment, then said, "You've always had questions about your dad. You said he was distant, especially after your mom died." Mark nodded. "Yeah. He barely talked about anything emotional. Especially not the past. It's like he was hiding something." Emily's eyes locked with his. "Maybe he was." That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He got out of bed, pulled out an old shoebox from the top of the closet, a box of old family photos, letters, and trinkets he hadn't looked at in years. He sat at the kitchen table, thumbing through yellowed pictures of birthdays, Christmas mornings, faded images of his dad looking young and distracted. At the bottom of the box was something he didn't remember seeing before, a sealed envelope, addressed in his father's unmistakable handwriting. To Mark. "If you ever need to know." Mark's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the envelope for a long time before finally breaking the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded carefully. "Mark. If you found this, it means the time has come. I made mistakes when I was younger, mistakes I thought I could bury. One of those mistakes was falling in love with someone I couldn't be with. Her name was Valerie. She was brilliant and beautiful and everything I wasn't ready for. We were young. We were reckless. And we had a child. I knew about her. I knew she had a daughter. But I chose to walk away. I'm sorry. I wish I had the courage to tell you while I was alive, but I was a coward. I didn't know how to face what I'd done. Her name is Jenna. She's your sister. And she deserves to be loved too. Dad**. Mark sat frozen, the letter trembling in his hands. So it was true. His dad had known. All these years, he had carried this secret. And now, long after his death, Mark was left to deal with the aftermath. The letter wasn't just a confirmation, it was an admission. A confession. A wound reopened with words scrawled in fading ink. Emily found him there a few minutes later, still clutching the letter like a lifeline. "What is it?" she asked, eyes scanning his face. Mark handed her the paper, unable to speak. She read it slowly, silently, and when she looked up, there was a mixture of sadness and sympathy in her eyes. He knew. Mark nodded. He knew. And he did nothing. For decades. Emily sat beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "But you're doing something now." "I don't even know what I'm doing," he whispered. "You're showing up," she said. That's more than he ever did. For the rest of the night, Mark didn't sleep. He just sat on the couch, Jenna's face replaying in his mind, his father's words etched into his memory. The next morning, he called her. "Hey," Jenna answered, surprised but cheerful. "I didn't expect to hear from you this soon." "I found something," Mark said. "A letter. From our dad." There was a pause on the line. He wrote you." Mark swallowed. He admitted it. "Everything. That he knew about you. That he left." Jenna was quiet, and when she finally spoke, her voice was unsteady. "I didn't know if he ever told anyone. My mom always said he didn't want anything to do with me. I thought maybe she was lying to protect me." "No," Mark said. "She was telling the truth." There was another long pause before Jenna said, "I'm sorry. I know this is probably bringing up a lot of pain for you." "It's not your fault," Mark said. "But I think we should talk again. In person. There's more to say." Jenna's voice brightened slightly. "I'd like that." After the call, Mark sat in silence for a long time. The truth had finally surfaced. It didn't answer all the questions, but it answered the biggest one. His life had been built on half-truths and missing pieces. Now, at last, he had a name, a letter, and a face to go with the missing chapter. And somewhere deep down, through the anger, the confusion, and the grief, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Relief. Mark sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the letter from his father like it might change if he looked long enough. The words were burned into his brain. "Her name is Jenna. She's your sister. And she deserves to be loved too." There was a painful kind of honesty in that sentence, one that both angered and softened him at the same time. For days after their second meeting, Mark and Jenna began slowly building something. They exchanged text messages, swapped a few childhood stories, and even laughed over the weird similarities they shared, how both of them added ketchup to scrambled eggs, to Emily's horror, or how they hated the sound of ice crunching between teeth. But despite the warmth, there was still something heavy between them. A missing piece neither one quite wanted to say out loud yet. Until Jenna texted one afternoon. "Hey. I'd really like to meet your family. Emily. The twins. If you're okay with that." Mark stared at the message for a long time. He wanted to say yes. Part of him wanted to bring her into this new life, this life that had felt torn apart and rebuilt so many times, it hardly resembled the one he'd started with. But the other part of him? The protective father, the once betrayed husband, the man still healing from secrets he didn't ask to inherit, he wasn't so sure. Emily didn't hesitate when he showed her the message. "I think she should come," she said. "If you're building something real with her, she should know your life. And the twins, well, maybe this will be something they grow up never having to question." So they planned a Saturday lunch at their house. Casual. Safe. Low pressure. The morning of the visit, Mark couldn't stop fidgeting. Emily was calm, as always, bustling around the kitchen, organizing snacks and tidying up. The twins were chasing each other around the living room, completely oblivious to the emotional magnitude of what was about to happen. Mark watched them, Noah with his endless curiosity, Olivia with her quiet strength. They were so different, so perfect. And he wondered, fleetingly, what they'd think years from now when they learned about Jenna. When they looked back and saw how complex love, and family, can be. At noon sharp, the doorbell rang. Emily opened the door with a welcoming smile, and there Jenna stood, nervous but smiling, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers. "Hi," she said shyly. "I figured flowers were safer than wine." Mark smiled despite himself. "You're probably right." Jenna stepped inside, her eyes scanning the cozy home, the kids' artwork on the fridge, the toys scattered near the couch, the scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. "It's beautiful," she said. This feels like a real home." "Thank you," Emily said warmly. "Come in, make yourself comfortable." The twins were more curious than shy. Olivia peeked around the corner, eyeing Jenna with wide eyes. Noah, ever the extrovert, marched right up to her and asked, "Are you Daddy's friend?" Jenna crouched to his level and smiled. "I guess I'm sort of like a new friend." "I'm your aunt." Noah squinted. Like Aunt Rachel?" "Kind of," Jenna said. "But newer." Olivia looked between them, then climbed onto the couch, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. The moment broke the tension, and everyone settled into a rhythm, slow, natural, a little awkward, but good. They ate lunch, told stories, and laughed about the twins' wild habits. Jenna brought a small scrapbook with a few photos of her own childhood, her first bike, a school picture with a missing front tooth, a birthday cake shaped like a dolphin. Mark sat beside her on the couch, flipping through the pages. "That's my mom," she said, pointing to a woman in a sun hat. "Valerie. She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. That's what pushed me to finally look for you. She told me about your dad just a few weeks before she died." Mark stared at the photo. She was beautiful, graceful in the way that made sense now. Jenna had her smile. "I wish I'd met her," Mark said softly. "She would have liked you," Jenna replied. After lunch, Emily took the twins outside to play, giving the siblings space. Jenna turned to Mark. "So, do you think this is going okay?" Mark chuckled under his breath. "Honestly? I think it's going better than I ever thought it would." Jenna looked relieved. "I was scared it would feel forced." "It doesn't," Mark said. "I don't know what it feels like exactly, but I know it's not forced." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the twins through the window. Olivia was showing Jenna's sunflowers to Noah, pretending they were magic wands. Jenna broke the silence. "There's something I've been meaning to ask." Mark turned to her, wary but open. "Okay. You said your dad wrote you a letter. Told you he knew about me. Did he say anything else? About why he left?" Mark exhaled. "No. Just that he was scared. That he didn't know how to face what he'd done." Jenna looked down, her fingers curling around the edge of her glass. "He never reached out. Not once. My whole life, I thought I wasn't worth the effort." Mark's jaw clenched. "I'm sorry. I don't know why he made the choices he did. But that's on him. Not you." She nodded slowly, then looked up at him. "Do you think we could ever feel like family?" Mark didn't answer right away. He glanced out the window again. Emily waved at him with a soft smile. The kids were running around, laughing. Life had been flipped upside down so many times, and somehow, it always managed to find its footing. He turned back to Jenna and nodded. "Yeah. I think we could." Her smile was small but real. "Good. Because I'd like that." And just like that, the foundation for something new began to form. It wouldn't be perfect. It wouldn't erase the pain of the past. But it was something. A beginning. The Sunday after Jenna's visit, everything seemed normal on the surface. The twins played in the backyard while Emily prepped lunches for the week. Mark was flipping through emails at the kitchen table, but his eyes weren't really scanning the words. His mind was elsewhere, specifically on Jenna. Their meeting had gone well. Better than he expected. She fit in. The kids liked her. Emily had been gracious and calm and supportive, like always. It was almost too good. Which, deep down, is why he couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. Because life never just let things be, not for long. Around mid-afternoon, Jenna called. "Hey, she said, her voice hesitant. Do you have a second? Yeah, what's up? I need to ask you something. And it's going to sound crazy. But I need you to hear me out. Mark sat up a little straighter. Okay. There was a long pause. Then she dropped it. Did your dad ever have a second family? Like, another one? Not just me. The air drained from the room. Mark blinked. What? What are you talking about? I got a message this morning, Jenna said, her voice rushed and nervous. From a woman. Her name's Simone. She said she's been following my posts online, you know, the ones I made on that DNA forum looking for relatives. And? She says she thinks she's our sister. Mark's stomach twisted. No, he said reflexively. No way. Jenna, we just figured you out. There's no way there's someone else. I didn't believe it either, she said quickly. But she sent me a picture. Mark's phone buzzed. Incoming photo. He tapped the screen. A woman in her late 20s. Hazel eyes. Rich brown skin. A soft, almost cautious smile. She looked nothing like Jenna, but there was something eerily familiar in her jawline. Something in her eyes that made Mark feel dizzy. She said she never knew who her dad was, Jenna continued. She just took one of those DNA tests last year. One of those 23andMe things. Got a weird hit. Then she saw my post. It matched our dad's side. Mark stood up and walked to the sink, the silence thick in the air. She lives in Atlanta, Jenna added. She said she doesn't want anything. She just wants to talk. But Mark, she really thinks she's one of us. Mark rubbed his face with both hands. Jesus Christ. He felt like the floor had dropped out from under him again. First Jenna. Now this. And for every new answer, it seemed like 10 more questions waited behind it. He thought he was getting closer to understanding the truth. Now the ground had shifted again. I can't do this, Mark muttered. Not again. Mark, Jenna's voice softened. I get it. I really do. But don't you want to know? Don't you want to finally know everything? I don't know anymore. He hung up before she could say anything else. Emily found him in the garage 20 minutes later, staring at the shelves like they held some secret escape. She knew that look. She walked over quietly and put a hand on his back. What happened? He told her. All of it. Simone. The DNA test. The photo. When he finished, Emily just exhaled, her eyes wide with disbelief, but not surprise. You think it's real? She asked. Mark didn't answer for a long time. Then, I don't know what to believe anymore. My dad, he kept so many things buried. I thought he was just a cold guy. Distant. But what if he was living a lie the whole time? Emily leaned against the wall beside him. Do you want to talk to her? I don't want to, Mark admitted. But I think I have to. That night, after the kids were asleep, Mark sat alone in the living room with a single photo on his phone. Simone. He stared at it again, wondering what it would be like to grow up never knowing where you came from, and then one day finding out it was a mess. A mess with faces and names and stories you didn't get to write. After a long pause, he opened a message window and started typing. Hey, Simone. My name's Mark. Jenna told me about you. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this. But maybe we should talk. I think it's time. He hit send before he could second guess it. There was no taking it back. The next day, Simone replied. Hi Mark. Thank you for reaching out. I know this is a lot. I've got questions too. Maybe we can figure it out together. Mark read the message 3 times. He felt something shift in him, not panic, not exactly peace either. Just, a sense that whatever came next, he was no longer just living his story. He was part of something bigger now. And that story wasn't finished. Not even close. The flight from Atlanta landed just past noon. Simone stepped off the plane clutching her phone and a small duffel bag, her stomach doing flip-flops like she was about to audition for a play she didn't even sign up for. The truth was, she wasn't even sure this was real. DNA tests. Secret siblings. Two strangers, Mark and Jenna, who were supposed to be family. Yeah. It sounded like the plot of a made-for-TV movie. Except it was happening to her. She moved through the airport with quiet confidence, but inside, she was a bundle of nerves. She'd been raised by a single mother in a small apartment on the east side of Atlanta. No father. No stories. Just silence. Her mom never said a word about him. Not even his name. The only clue was a photograph hidden in the back of a junk drawer, an old, faded picture of a young white man in a military uniform. No name. No date. Just, there. And then, one Christmas, a friend gifted her a DNA kit for fun. That's when everything cracked open. She hadn't expected much. Maybe some distant cousin, some heritage trivia. But the results had matched her with someone named Jenna Landry. And Jenna had a public post on a genealogy forum, looking for relatives. Possibly from California. Father, James Holloway. James Holloway. She Googled the name. Her heart nearly stopped when the photo came up. It was the same man from the drawer. Her father. It took her a week to build up the nerve to message Jenna. And when she did, it opened a door she could never shut again. Now, here she was. In California. About to meet the people her life might have been different with. Mark watched through the window as the rideshare pulled up. Emily stood next to him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You ready?" she asked. "No," he said truthfully. "But I'm doing it anyway." The door opened, and Simone stepped out. She was even more striking in person, tall, poised, with a quiet grace about her. Her eyes scanned the house, and when she saw Mark and Emily through the window, she gave a soft wave. Mark opened the door. "Simone." She nodded. "Hi." He took a breath, stepped outside, and they hugged, awkward at first, but not cold. Just, unsure. "Come in," he said. She smiled gratefully. "Thanks." Inside, the conversation started slow. Jenna arrived 20 minutes later, her energy more familiar now. The three of them sat around the table, Jenna nervously sipping tea, Mark leaning forward with his arms crossed, Simone sitting straight-backed but calm. It felt like an interview at first. Names. Birthdays. Childhoods. Little timelines being lined up like puzzle pieces. Then Simone pulled out the photo. "This is all I ever had," she said. "Found it when I was 10. My mom always shut down when I asked about him." Mark stared at the image. It was his father, no question. Younger, in uniform, smiling faintly at the camera. "He never told me," Mark said, shaking his head. "He didn't even tell me about Jenna until after he died." Jenna added, "I only found out a few years ago myself. It's like he went out of his way to make sure none of us ever crossed paths." Simone's face was unreadable. "Do you hate him?" Mark looked up. "I used to. Now. I think I just feel sorry for him. And for us." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of years and choices hanging heavy in the air. Then Simone did something unexpected, she laughed. Mark blinked. "What?" "I was just thinking, this is insane. Like, how is this even real? I spent my whole life thinking I didn't have a dad. Now I've got two siblings, a niece and nephew I haven't met yet, and a whole messy, tangled backstory." Jenna laughed too. Yeah, welcome to the club. Even Mark cracked a smile. There was something oddly healing about laughing together. Like the ridiculousness of it all made it a little easier to carry. Later that evening, Emily brought out dinner. The twins came downstairs and peeked around the corner like curious kittens. Are they shy? Simone whispered. Only for the first 2 minutes, Emily said with a smirk. Sure enough, Noah was the first to approach. Are you the new aunt? He asked, pointing. Simone grinned. I think so. Is that okay? He looked her over, thoughtful. Do you know how to do the robot? Simone blinked. Kind of. He nodded. Then you're cool. Olivia followed, quieter but no less curious. She climbed onto Emily's lap and whispered, "She looks nice." Emily smiled. She is. Dinner was noisy, chaotic, and warm, spaghetti, bread rolls, and laughter spilling out into a moment that felt almost normal. Simone sat at the table, watching it all with wide eyes. She hadn't grown up with this. She'd seen it in movies, maybe glimpsed it at friends' homes, but never like this. After the twins went to bed, the siblings sat outside on the patio under string lights, sipping tea, wrapped in borrowed blankets. Jenna pulled her knees to her chest. So what happens now? She asked. No one had an answer right away. Then Mark spoke. We figure it out. One step at a time. Simone nodded. I'd like that. Even if it's messy. Jenna added, especially if it's messy. That's kind of our thing. And just like that, something that had once been buried, hidden in silence and shame, had started to bloom into something real. Not perfect. Not even close. But real. And for the first time in a long time, all three of them felt like they belonged somewhere. Even if they had to build it from scratch. Jenna didn't plan on opening the old box. Not that day, anyway. It had been sitting in the back of her closet for years, stuff from her mom, photos, letters, some jewelry, and a few random documents she'd never really looked at. But now, with everything happening, the DNA match, meeting Simone, reconnecting with Mark, curiosity got the better of her. She pulled it out on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, the kind where the whole world feels like it's holding its breath. A perfect time for answers. Or ghosts. She found a stack of faded birthday cards and receipts first. Then a crumpled hospital discharge form from her birth. And under it, something strange. A letter. Folded. Yellowing. The paper felt brittle, like one hard breath would shred it. The handwriting wasn't her mother's. It was signed, James Holloway. Her father. Jenna stared at it, her hands cold. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe an apology. An explanation. But what she got instead was a bombshell. Valerie. I need to tell you the truth. You've asked me before, and I've always dodged it. I thought I was protecting you. But I realize now I was protecting myself. The child may not be mine. I don't want to believe it, but the timeline doesn't make sense. I love you, but I can't pretend I don't have doubts. I just don't know how to be a father to a child that might not be mine. I'm sorry. James asterisk. Jenna's heart dropped into her stomach. Not his. She read it again. And again. But the words didn't change. She sat frozen for minutes, maybe hours, replaying every conversation in her head. With Mark. With Simone. All of them trying to piece together a family tree that might have one more broken branch than they thought. She picked up her phone. Dialed Mark. He answered almost instantly. Hey, everything okay? No, she said. I found something. You need to come over. Mark and Simone showed up within the hour. Jenna handed Mark the letter without saying anything. He read it in silence, his eyes narrowing with every line. Simone stood behind him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "So, what are you saying?" Mark asked, looking up. "I'm saying there's a chance I'm not your sister," Jenna replied, her voice flat. "At least not biologically." Mark blinked, caught between disbelief and anger. "You took the DNA test." "We matched." "No," Jenna corrected, her voice tight. "We matched as half-siblings. It never guaranteed it was through our father's side. It could have been through my mom and your mom. We never confirmed it." Simone took a step forward, her brow furrowed. "But we did match on Dad's side. The DNA site showed it." Jenna shook her head. "It showed similarity. But with the way these tests work, it's not foolproof. There's overlap. Cousins can show up as half-siblings. Matches can be misread. Especially if you're not looking at the raw data." Mark sat down heavily on the couch, the letter still in his hand. "So, you might not be our sister." "I might not be your sister," Jenna said, pointing to him. "But I might still be Simone's." They all looked at each other. Confusion. Hurt. Anger. Most of all, exhaustion. Mark broke the silence. "We need a real DNA test. All three of us. Something conclusive." No one argued. A week later, the results came in. Mark sat with Emily at the kitchen table when he opened the email. Simone and Jenna were both on Zoom, waiting, silent. The screen loaded. The words were crystal clear. Jenna Holloway, no paternal match to Mark Holloway. Jenna Holloway, no paternal match to Simone Ellis. Mark Holloway and Simone Ellis, 99.7% half-sibling match. Time stopped. Jenna sat still, her face blank. Simone blinked. "So, you're not our sister." Jenna shook her head. "I guess not." Mark felt like the ground disappeared from beneath him. How is that possible?" "I don't know," Jenna said quietly. "My mom said he was my father. She was sure. I guess, she was wrong. Or maybe she lied. I don't know which is worse." Nobody spoke for a long time. Then, Jenna laughed. A hollow, aching sound. "All this time, I thought I was finally finding out who I was," she said. "Turns out, I'm more lost than ever." Mark leaned forward. "Jenna, listen, it doesn't change what we've built. Not for me. I don't care what that test says." "I do," she whispered. "I needed this to mean something." Simone added, gently, "It still can. Maybe not by blood. But connection isn't always genetic." Jenna gave a weak smile. "Thanks. But I think I need some time." They understood. Later that night, Mark sat on the porch with Simone. The sky was clear, the stars unusually bright. "So, just you and me, huh?" he said. "Guess so," she replied, nudging his shoulder. "I didn't expect this." "Neither did I. I thought I had one sister. Then two. Now I'm back to one, but a different one." They both laughed. A little sad. A little relieved. Mark looked at her. "You think Jenna will be okay?" "I think she's strong," Simone said. "And I think she'll find her real story. One way or another." Mark nodded. "Maybe that's what we're all doing. Just trying to find the real version of our story." She smiled. "Looks like we're writing it as we go." Jenna couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the clock ticking louder than usual in the dark. The DNA results kept flashing through her mind like a warning light: not your father. Not your family. Not your story. But it had to be her story. It was the only one she knew. And if James Holloway wasn't her father, then who was? The next morning, Jenna did what she always did when life made no sense. She dug. She started with her mother's belongings, old photo albums, journals, address books with names she barely recognized. Valerie, her mother, had always been a little closed off about her past. That was a different life, she used to say. No need to dig up ghosts. But ghosts were exactly what Jenna needed now. Halfway through the third album, buried between vacation photos and birthday cakes, she saw him. A man in a faded denim jacket, camera around his neck. He stood beside Valerie in a park, one arm around her shoulders. The handwriting under the photo said simply, "Me and Tony, summer '89. Jenna stared at it, heart pounding. Tony. She flipped through more pages, there he was again. Smiling at Valerie's baby shower. Holding a newborn Jenna. Kissing her forehead in a candid shot at the beach. Why hadn't she seen these before? She grabbed her phone, scanned the photo with a reverse image app, and fed the name into every genealogy forum and people search site she could find. By the end of the day, she had a full name, Anthony Reed. And a last known address, Santa Rosa, just 3 hours north. The pieces were falling into place, but she had no idea what the picture would look like once it was complete. Jenna called Simone first. "I think I found him," she said, breathless. "My real father." Simone was stunned. "Already? His name's Anthony Reed. My mom used to call him Tony. I found pictures. From when she was pregnant. He was at my birth, Simone. Like, in the room." Simone's voice softened. "You okay?" "I don't know," Jenna admitted. "But I'm driving to Santa Rosa tomorrow. Want company?" Jenna smiled. "Actually, yeah. That would be good." The next morning, Jenna and Simone set out on the road before sunrise. It was quiet in the car for the first hour, both of them watching the sky shift from navy to pink over the hills. Then, somewhere past Petaluma, Simone spoke. "Do you want him to be your dad?" Jenna stared out the window. "I want the truth. If that's him, then, yeah, I want to know him. But mostly, I just want to stop wondering. I want something to be real for once." Simone nodded slowly. "I get that." They arrived around 10 a.m., pulling into a small, well-kept neighborhood shaded with old oak trees. The address led them to a tan bungalow with a neatly trimmed lawn and wind chimes dancing in the breeze. Jenna's hands trembled as she rang the doorbell. A moment later, the door creaked open. An older man stood there. Late 50s, early 60s. Full head of salt and pepper hair. Same denim jacket from the photo, only more faded now. "Yes?" he asked, curious but kind. Jenna's voice caught in her throat. "Hi," Simone jumped in, offering a gentle smile. "Sorry to bother you. Are you Anthony Reed?" "I am." Jenna took a shaky breath. "My name is Jenna. Jenna Landry. I think you knew my mother." "Valerie." The name hit him like a ripple. His expression shifted, shock, recognition, something like guilt. "I remember Valerie," he said slowly. "Very well." Jenna held up the photo. "That's you. With her. Holding me." He stared at it, eyes misting. "Yeah. That's me." She hesitated. "Anthony, were you my father?" He didn't speak right away. Just opened the screen door and stepped out onto the porch. He looked at Jenna with something like awe, then heartbreak. "I always wondered if you'd come," he said softly. Jenna's chest tightened. "So it's true." He nodded. "I loved your mother," he said. "We were together for almost 2 years. When she got pregnant, she wasn't sure. There was someone else. James. But I always hoped you were mine. Why didn't you try to find me?" "I did," he said, eyes glistening. But your mother shut me out. She told me it was better for you to have a stable father. James had money. He had status. I was just a freelance photographer with no savings and no plan. She thought she was doing what was best. Simone looked at Jenna, stunned. Jenna sat down on the porch step, overwhelmed. You were there, she said, half in disbelief. I'm not some mistake. I'm not a question mark. No, he said, kneeling beside her. You're mine. I never stopped thinking about you. Tears filled Jenna's eyes. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't tied up with a bow. But for the first time in her life, she felt it. She belonged somewhere. Back at the car, Jenna and Simone sat in silence before heading back. Then Jenna whispered, I want to get a paternity test. Just to confirm it. Sure, Simone said. But I believe him. Yeah, Jenna smiled. So do I. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. Jenna Landry, 99.9% match with Anthony Reed. She held the paper to her chest, breathing deeply. No more doubts. No more questions. Just truth. Mark had been quiet since Jenna's discovery. Not distant, just quieter. Thoughtful. Watching his kids more intently. Holding Emily's hand a little longer. There was a heaviness in him that he couldn't quite explain, even to himself. He wasn't angry that Jenna wasn't his sister, not really. Disappointed, maybe. But more than anything, he felt like the ground beneath his life had been made of sand all along, and the tides just kept washing pieces of it away. He missed having something solid. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, Mark sat out back under the string lights with a glass of whiskey, watching the sky deepen into indigo. Simone joined him, carrying a blanket and 2 mugs of tea. They sat in silence for a while before she spoke. You okay? Mark exhaled. I keep thinking about my dad. About how much he kept from us. From me. Every time I think I understand who he was, something else comes up that makes me question everything all over again. Simone nodded slowly. I get that. I still wonder if he ever thought about me. About what it meant to leave my mom behind. Mark looked at her. Do you hate him? She was quiet. Then, I did. For a long time. But lately. I'm just tired of carrying it. He looked over at her, surprised. I don't know, she said. Maybe I'm finally realizing that holding on to that anger doesn't make anything better. It doesn't give me back the childhood I lost. It doesn't change the fact that he made 100 wrong decisions. But it does keep me stuck. Mark nodded. I've been stuck too. For years. Simone offered a small smile. Then maybe it's time to let it go. Not for him. For us. He looked down at his drink, the ice clinking softly. How? Forgiveness isn't saying what he did was okay, she said. It's saying you're not going to let it define you anymore. Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. He hadn't cried in years. Not since his father's funeral. But tonight, he let the tears come. Quiet, controlled, but real. Simone said nothing. She just sat there beside him, letting the silence hold space for something they both needed to feel. The next day, Mark went to the cemetery. He hadn't been back since the funeral. The headstone was modest, simple. James Holloway. 1949 to 2021. Beloved husband. Father. A life of service. Mark stared at those last words, a life of service. It felt like a lie. He crouched down and pulled a few weeds from the edge of the grave, then just sat there. I don't know why you did what you did, he said aloud. Why you lied. Why you hid things. Maybe you thought you were protecting us. Maybe you were just scared. He looked down at the grass. You weren't a great dad. But you were my dad. And even with all the damage, I learned something from you. I learned what not to do. A breeze rustled through the trees. Mark took a deep breath. I forgive you, he said softly. Not because you deserve it. But because I'm done carrying this weight. And just like that, he felt a shift, small, quiet, but powerful. He didn't feel lighter. Not yet. But he felt clearer. Later that night, Jenna invited Mark and Simone over. I want to show you something, she said. On the living room wall, she'd hung 3 framed photos. One of her with Anthony, one of Simone with her mother, and one of Mark with the twins. I know we're not siblings by blood, she said. But that doesn't mean we're not family. We chose each other. And that means something. Simone smiled. It means everything. Mark nodded. It means we're still in this. Together. They all hugged, this strange little trio stitched together by chaos, DNA, and now, choice. Forgiveness had made space for something new. Not a perfect ending. But maybe a new beginning. 6 months later, the house was full again. Laughter spilled through the open windows. The twins ran through the yard with water balloons, shrieking as Anthony tried to dodge them with exaggerated, cartoonish movements. Simone sat with Emily on the porch, sipping lemonade, while Jenna stood by the grill beside Mark, 2 people who'd once been strangers, now comfortably sharing a spatula and old inside jokes. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what any of them imagined their family would look like. But it was theirs. Mark looked out at the chaos, flipping a burger, then glanced at Jenna. Remember when we thought this was going to be a disaster? Jenna smirked. It was a disaster. Remember when we thought I was your sister? Then I wasn't. Then we didn't know what the hell to do with each other. Yeah, he said with a grin. Good times. She bumped her shoulder against his. Still glad I found you. Mark smiled. Same. After dinner, as the sun started to sink behind the trees, Mark called everyone together on the back porch. He looked nervous. Jenna raised an eyebrow. Okay, Mark began, standing next to Emily, who was holding a manila folder. So, we've got news. Simone perked up. The good kind. The very good kind, Emily said, smiling wide. Mark took a deep breath. We're adopting. Gasps. Laughter. Shocked applause. What? Simone cried. Seriously? Jenna added. You're doing it. Emily nodded. We've been talking about it for a while, but after everything with you two, and seeing how family can come together in the weirdest, most unexpected ways, it just felt right. Mark opened the folder and handed them a photo, a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with huge brown eyes and the shyest smile. His name is Isaac, Mark said. And we meet him next week. Everyone went quiet for a moment. Then Simone whispered, You're giving him what none of us had. A family from the start. Mark swallowed hard. That's the goal. Jenna's eyes welled with tears. He's lucky. Emily shook her head. We're lucky. Later that evening, after the twins had fallen asleep and the yard had quieted down, the 3 siblings, Mark, Simone, and Jenna, stood outside under the stars. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Everything that had once been broken, confused, buried, had found light. Mark finally broke the silence. So. This is it, huh? The full circle. Simone looked up at the sky. Not the end. Just, another chapter. Jenna grinned. One hell of a first season. They laughed, linked arms, and stood there together in the silence of everything they had lost, and everything they had found. Family, it turned out, wasn't something you're just born into. Sometimes, it's the one you build. Family dynamics therapist Dr. Melissa Chen weighs in. This story illustrates one of the most powerful truths of human connection: biology might make you related, but choice is what makes you family. Mark, Simone, and Jenna represent what many people face today: complex relationships, identity questions, and the hunger to belong. Through transparency, forgiveness, and openness to redefine what family means, they were able to heal across bloodlines and broken expectations. And the final choice: to adopt. It shows that love doesn't just patch holes, it plants something entirely new. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?